When was the last time you let yourself want something so deeply that the thought of not getting it actually scared you? Cared enough that if it didn't work out, you'd be disappointed. Cared enough that you were willing to put yourself on the line for it. While you think about that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Aleja, but you can call me Lay. Welcome back to A Little Atypical, where we dive into all things wellness, personal development, and lifestyle topics. I like to approach typical topics from a not so typical perspective, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Today, we're diving into the cultural obsession with effortlessness and why it might actually be one of the most dangerous traps we can fall into. If this is your first time listening, typically I choose a theme of the month and center episodes around it. And in case you're new here, I am doing something a bit different this month and posting twice a week. Mondays are for monthly theme episodes, and it is my regular posting day. Thursday is now Thought Daughter Thursdays or Thought Leader Thursdays, where I deep dive on anything more societal, not necessarily things that are related to the topic of the month, which is effort for January, but still fun to think about. If you listen to episode, I believe it was 71, we talked about the effort neediness cycle and how to break free from that toxic pattern. Today, we're zooming out to look at the bigger picture. Why so many of us resist effort in the first place? And what are we actually losing when we do? Because I keep seeing discourse online about choosing mediocrity and embracing the bare minimum. And while I understand where it's coming from, I think we need to talk about what we're really saying when we glorify effortlessness. And let me be clear from the start. This conversation is not about glamorizing hustle culture or saying we always need to be productive. I don't believe in those things. This isn't about grinding yourself or whatever, or proving your worth through constant work. When I talk about effort, I'm not talking about hard work for the sake of hard work. I'm talking about intentional action, showing up with purpose for things that actually matter to you. I also believe there is a direct relationship between effort and self-respect. When you consistently put in effort, real, intentional effort, you're not just working towards external goals. You're building something more internal, which is self-trust. And that is a topic I personally feel very strongly about and have talked about in the past. Because you're proving to yourself that you're someone who shows up. You're demonstrating that you care about yourself enough to invest in your own life. But when we act like, quote unquote, caring is cringe and trying is embarrassing, we ruin that foundation. We start losing our sense of personal capacity. We forget that we're actually able to create change. And I want to say this again, that this isn't about productivity culture or hustle culture or just all of those things. This is about something deeper, aka your relationship with your own potential. Somewhere down the line, it became so desired to be so nonchalant about our life. It is what it is. And yes, we can't change everything, but slight changes can change our perception and how life feels for us overall. It's like somewhere along the way, appearing unbothered became the ultimate flex. Like acting like nothing really matters to you, like you're just casually floating through life without investment. And look, I get the appeal. Nonchalance feels safe. It protects you from disappointment. If you never admit you care, you can never be hurt when things don't work out. But that type of way of being easily leads to passive living. It leads to misled opportunities. It leads to a life where things happen to you instead of a life where you actively create. And all I want to say is people waste their energy trying hard not to try to care about people, things, and trying to convince other people that they're so unbothered about anything and everything. Wouldn't it just be faster and easier to say that you're afraid of commitment? Because that's really what this is all about, right? Like, not to be sassy or anything, but if you're afraid of effort, you're also afraid of commitment, because effort is commitment. Effort is saying, this matters to me. I'm willing to invest myself here. And that's terrifying because it makes you vulnerable. The fear of trying, and by extension failing, makes people choose nonchalance as protection. But that protection comes at such a huge cost. It robs your life of meaning. It keeps you on the sidelines of your own existence. So before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself, where in your life are you choosing nonchalance because you're actually afraid to care? I want you to embrace it because in this episode, I'm not sugarcoating anything. I think maybe on some levels, people are internally aware of the things I will be sharing today, but maybe hearing about it more straightforward, how effortlessness is a facade, will help heal your relationship to it. So, starting off, one reason people reject the idea of effort is because honestly, they define it in a very narrow stance. They think effort only looks like the things that are visible and dramatic, like, oh, going to the gym, working overtime, studying for hours upon hours upon hours. And the first time I really thought deeply about invisible labor was in a sociology course centered around emotions in society. That class completely shifted how I understood effort and work because it revealed how much of what we do, especially the emotional and cognitive labor, goes completely unseen and unrecognized. Even in people we describe as naturally, quote unquote, talented, nothing is truly effortless. Talent without nurturing leads to regression or, in some ways, become ineffective because let's say you have a talent for writing, right? But you don't use it. You haven't wrote in years. If you're not using that, you're not keeping up to date with the new methods or stories or anything that is new to that particular area. Much of meaningful effort is invisible, and I just want to provide some examples. So the first example is the mental load, like keeping track of deadlines, remembering important dates, planning ahead, holding multiple considerations in your mind at once. Then obviously like emotional regulation, choosing not to react impulsively, processing your feelings instead of avoiding them, staying calm in whatever we perceive as stressful situations. Next thing, research and planning, which is, looking up information, comparing options, making informed decisions instead of just winging it. And to add on to that, observation and awareness, so paying attention to patterns, noticing what works and what doesn't work, being present instead of checking out. And of course, I have to mention daily habits and routines, which is showing up consistently even when it gets boring, even when you don't feel like it, even when it feels like it's taking too long. Okay? All of this is effort and all of it counts. The point of it kind of compounds over time. In episode 71, we referenced an article which was essentially about how style is never truly effortless. And I talk about that in the episode, why it matters to the conversation, so I'm not going to go over that. But someone in that article talked about how their dad having what appeared to be quote unquote effortless style was actually that their dad took action by spending years observing, learning, and paying attention to certain things. I believe it was like from movies and culture and things like that. And that observation was invisible effort. Over time, all those small moments of awareness, in that case, compounded into what looked like natural, effortless taste. And another example is like when you try to grow as a person. If you're listening to this, you're probably very interested in personal development. So growing as a person takes so much effort. It's admitting when you're wrong, acknowledging when you could have handled things differently without dwelling on it, and learning to be better instead of repeating the same behaviors simply because they feel familiar. Like they feel you're used to them. In my case, every time I choose self-awareness over being defensive, every time I pause before reacting, every time I, question my own patterns and kind of call myself out, that's effort. It grows into something. Like each small act of intentional growth makes the next one slightly easier, more natural. And I will say this once, and it may sound harsh, but the only way to have a life without effort is to have a life of excuses. And is that a life truly worth living? When you dismiss invisible efforts as somehow less legitimate, you set yourself up to feel like you're doing nothing, even when you're doing so much. That is why essentially we have moments of burnout and resentment. More importantly, you start to believe that other people's success is effortless, quote unquote effortless, because you can't see all the invisible labor they're doing behind the scenes. And yes, things get easier with practice. And this is a point that I really want people to consider. Yes, skill development and early experiences influence how much effort something requires, but that doesn't make things truly effortless. And understanding this is really crucial. Like, okay, say someone did gymnastics and dance as a child, and years later they want to join the high school cheer team. Something like that. Like something we all know. Will they have an easier time than someone who's never done anything athletic? Absolutely. But they had to put in the effort. It was just a different kind of effort. The effort they put into gymnastics and dance happened earlier in their life. Maybe their parents noticed they were energetic and wanted to give them a healthy outlook. Maybe the family had athletic tendencies, or maybe the kids simply saw something on TV and said, I want to do that, and their parents were supportive enough to make it happen. And yes, that early investment created a foundation. Those years of effort learning, for example, body awareness, building strength, understanding rhythm and coordination, it became baseline that basically transferred to a new activity. So when this person joins the cheer team, they're not starting from zero, but that foundation doesn't erase the need for effort. They still have to learn new skills, build team chemistry, memorize routines, maintain their fitness, whatever else cheerleaders do. It's just they understand how to do it at a certain level already. And all of this example is to say is the effort didn't disappear or it was never there. It just shifted. Our environments do create a foundation, but it still takes effort to build on it. When we see someone who makes something look easy, we assume it is easy for them. But what we're actually seeing is competence and skill built on years of prior effort that we just didn't witness, that we had no proof of, right? Effort that may have started so early that we don't even think to count it. As someone who is a late bloomer in many areas of life, it can feel incredibly frustrating to see other people seemingly get what I want with these. And it's so tempting to start guessing what contributed to those outcomes, to assume it's because of their upbringing, genetics, their luck, whatever. But something for myself that I've had to accept, that kind of speculation doesn't do me any favors. It just keeps me stuck in a comparison mode instead of taking responsibility for my own path. And one example I can share is my health journey. It's been very, very hard to see how rapidly some people change. And it's easy to say it's because of XYZ, because they had athletic parents, because they were taught healthy habits as a kid. But I had to accept that there was no point in my life that I was ever truly healthy. I was always someone who went to extremes. And instead of looking at other people's journeys and making assumptions, it's my responsibility to be honest with myself about my own patterns and starting point. And I will say that that honesty is initially uncomfortable, but it is also very liberating at the same time, because once I stopped comparing my chapter at this point, I would call it chapter 2 or 3 to someone's chapter 10, I could actually focus on the effort I needed to put in based on where I actually was. And I say this not to undermine people's feelings, because I truly do get it, the frustration, but I had to accept that ease is earned for the most part. Obviously, there are some conditions, while effortlessness is a myth. Honestly, I kind of want to move on to the dark side of wishing for effortlessness. I see this all the time in manifestation spaces. People say they want effortless love or effortless success or effortless transformation. And I understand the desire, because obviously, who wouldn't want good things to just fall into their lap? But the problem here is when you wish for effortlessness, you're not being specific enough about what you actually want. And the universe or your subconscious or spirit or whoever you believe in, whatever you want to call it, might give you exactly what you asked for in the worst way possible. You want an effortless relationship? Cool. You might attract someone who puts in zero effort into the relationship. Someone who doesn't plan dates, doesn't communicate, doesn't show up when things get hard, because that's effortless, right? Just not in the way you meant. What you actually wanted was a relationship that allows you to feel at ease, natural, compatible, flowing, but you confuse ease with a lack of effort. And those things are not the same thing. Your effort level directly impacts the quality of experiences, relationships, and opportunities that come into your life. Low effort equals low quality returns. When you glorify effortlessness, you're essentially lowering your standards. You're saying, I don't want to work for anything good, so I'll accept whatever shows up with no effort required. And what shows up is usually not great. The job you get without trying is probably not your dream job. The relationship that requires zero effort, probably not fulfilling. The friendships where neither party truly invests probably feels really shallow. And I experienced this firsthand when I finally figured out what I truly wanted to do career-wise. I started asking myself why it had been so difficult to connect with people I needed to make my dream career happen, right? And when I looked honestly at my life, I realized I could barely think of connections that I had actively initiated. Even my closest friendships now, most of them came because I was already friends with someone else who introduced us. You know, the whole introvert being adopted by extroverts has always been the story of my life. And I've always had this pattern too, is if someone doesn't seem to want me in their life, I'm more than happy to fall back and, leave quietly, not be so persistent. But as an adult, I realized that persistence is crucial, even if it means dealing with blows to the ego, like someone not responding to a message. And the key, specifically career wise, is like learning not to take things so personally while you're trying to connect. Because sometimes people are just busy or distracted or going through something, and it's very rarely about you. But if you never follow up, if you never push past the initial discomfort, you miss out on connections that could have been meaningful. And in the process of discovering what I want to do with my life, I began to view effort in a completely different way. Effort became a filter, a way to naturally screen for quality and alignment. When you put in genuine effort, you naturally filter out people, opportunities, and experiences that aren't aligned with your goals. Effort is a screening mechanism for quality. If you're putting energy into your career, you're going to attract opportunities that match your energy. You're going to weed out the low effort, low reward options because they won't even register as possibilities. If you're putting genuine effort into showing up as your best self in relationships, you're going to filter out people who aren't willing to meet you at that level. And that's a good thing. Effort doesn't just create results, it creates standards. going back to talking about this whole discourse about embracing mediocrity and being okay with doing the bare minimum. And yet again, I want to say, like, I understand the impulse, especially as a reaction to burnout and toxic productivity culture. And I also want to acknowledge something crucial that can't be ignored, especially in this discussion, which is for many people, and especially Black women and other marginalized groups, the desire for mediocrity isn't about lowering personal standards. It's about wanting relief from disproportionately higher standards they're held to based on their race or gender. When Black women say they want to be mediocre, you know, initially I was triggered by the conversation. Maybe it's because of upbringing. So I had to really like sit down and reflect on that. But I eventually understood that they're not saying they don't want extraordinary lives or big accomplishments. They're saying they want the bar for basic respect, opportunities, and success to be as leveled for them as it is for others. And this is relevant for those whose families, for example, immigrated here and who were sold the idea of the American dream, which essentially is learned based on media, was through, hard work, only to watch with adaptations of technology and social media seemingly to create shortcuts for some people but not others. Like, there's a reason why to this day we're still having discourse about who's the POC Alex Earl. Some people can simply announce that they're jobless, say they want to grow their platforms, get brand deals sent to them, and find success simply because, who knows, the algorithm? Maybe? For many people to recognize that the playing field isn't level and pretending that it is does dismiss real systemic barriers. So when we talk about rejecting mediocrity, we also have to hold this space for nuance, because for some people, the exhaustion isn't just from hustle culture. It's from having to work 3 times as hard to get half as far. So I wanted to bring that up because I know to this point it may sound like I'm saying, that effortlessness is bad and it's just this and that. And to be honest, I don't want it to come off like that or come off as so pro productivity culture, because it's not that I'm pro productivity culture. I'm pro believing in your potential, pro you should want what's best for yourself. So that being said, here's what is also happening with these conversations, that people wearing the I'm not trying that hard as a badge of honor. So with that being said, here's also what's happening in some of these conversations, that we have people claiming mediocrity up front so they don't have to face the possibility of failure. For some people, it is a protection mechanism that you never admit you're trying. You can never fail. You always have the out of, well, I wasn't even really trying anyways. But this self-protection comes at a huge cost because it prevents genuine success and growth. It keeps you stuck in a place where you're not challenged, not developing, not becoming more of who you're capable of being. So we also need to talk about the cultural messages about effort that we internalize, I'm just going to list some examples that I've seen, which is, if it's meant to be, it'll be easy. The right person won't require effort. If you're struggling, you're doing it wrong. While I get the sentiment of these sayings, these narratives are everywhere and kind of deeply flawed, because nothing worth having is effortless. The right person still requires effort. It's in communication, vulnerability, showing up consistently. Struggling doesn't mean on the wrong path. It means you're growing. It means that you may have had a different starting point. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying, that development and how we develop does play a role. There's no ignoring that. But you don't have to grow in all the ways like some people make it out to be. You just need to grow in some ways, because everyone has a foundation, right? Everyone's foundation is different. And I think because of, at least in my view, that because of a certain foundation I had, there's still some benefits to who I am. And there are things that I need to change. And I'm saying that because no one is all good or all bad. No one knows everything. There are some things for us to relearn, unlearn, and things for us to keep. But all I'm saying is struggle doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. It just means you have something new to learn. And we need to challenge these narratives because for many of us, it's keeping us small and it's giving ourselves permission to quit before we even really start. So before we wrap up, I want to discuss reframing our relationship with effort. Obviously, effort rejection is a response to hustle culture. I get it. Some of you are pushing back against effort because you're exhausted from hustle culture, burnt out, and have like this relentless pressure to be productive every waking moment. So the reaction to things requiring effort makes a lot of sense, and especially with older generations that all they said was all you have to do is have work. All you have to do is work hard. And that's why I want to separate this definition of hard work versus effort, because I also don't believe that effort is just the seen work, the visible work. And I hope I made that very clear that there is invisible labor behind effort and how I am speaking about it. But I also want to say that rejecting effort entirely isn't the answer. What we actually need to do is cultivate a healthy relationship with effort, one that can recognize effort as essential to every part of your life without falling into a trap of seeing effort as, oh, just work hard and that's the solution to everything, because it's not that either. I think it's a mixture of understanding and intentionality plus action. And this is why understanding the difference between effort and effortlessness matters so much, because we need to redirect effort towards what genuinely matters to us. Not effort for the sake of checking boxes, not effort to prove that we're worthy of some imaginary standard, but effort as an investment in our own lives, our own growth, our own joy. And I think when people say they want effortlessness, what they are really craving is ease. And that craving makes so much sense, especially if you've been running on empty trying to hustle. If life feels like too much, if you're constantly stressed about everything, if you feel completely tapped out, of course you want to do nothing. Of course you're exhausted. Everything about those feelings are so valid, but a distinction worth making is that you're not actually craving zero effort. You're craving relief from effort that's unsustainable. You're craving effort that feels aligned and manageable instead of overwhelming and draining. And recognizing this distinction is key to building that healthier relationship with effort. And something else I want to acknowledge is I know it feels hard to care about things and be emotionally invested when you want a specific outcome. Maybe you even have shame around wanting that thing in the first place. This is why pretending to do something, quote unquote, unintentionally feels safer, because you're denying you even want those things. You don't want to be seen as bad or shallow or toxic or whatever other negative association exists around whatever you actually desire. So then you downplay your effort. You act like you don't care. You say, oh, I just stumbled into this, or I'm not really trying that hard, because admitting you care, admitting you want something specific feels incredibly vulnerable. It feels like you're exposing yourself to judgment. And I just want to remind you that your desires aren't shameful. Wanting things, whether it's success, love, recognition, beauty, wealth, whatever, doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And pretending you don't want those things doesn't actually protect you. It just keeps you from actually getting them. This is the trap of effortlessness. The illusion that you can have what you want without acknowledging that you want it or investing in it. Things absolutely get easier with practice and time, but true effortlessness doesn't exist for anything. meaningful. What does exist is ease, and ease is something you earn through being consistent and intentional over time. And honestly, it's beautiful to acknowledge that, because once you learn what is consistency, once you learn that showing up doesn't mean showing up the same way every day, it just means that you're present, you're doing what you can that day. It feels like anyone could do that. Anyone could have effort in that way. And it also means that the hard things you're dealing with can become easier. Not because you'll stop trying, but because you'll develop more skills around it, competence around it. The effort doesn't vanish, it just stops feeling like you're drowning so much. And once you start viewing effort as an investment, it kind of completely shifts your perspective. And this shift, going from viewing effort as a burden to effort as an investment, is what a healthy relationship with effort looks like. It touches every area of your life, your careers, your relationships, and I mean both romantic and platonic, your health, your creative pursuits, your personal growth, literally everything. So just try to reframe it. Instead of saying effort is hard and something to avoid, think of it as effort is how I invest in the life I want. What you're willing to put effort into shows what you actually value, not what you claim to value. And if you say relationships matter, but you never invest energy into them, your behavior is telling you something. If you say health is important to you, but you can't be bothered to learn new things about it, that is also information that you should be taking in, because effort isn't the enemy. Misdirected effort is the enemy. Effort without intention is the enemy. But effort itself, that is a sense of power. All this to say is, don't be misled by the effortlessness trap. The idea that if something is right, that it should require nothing from you. Because that is just another way of avoiding vulnerability, of caring, of trying, of fully showing up, and honestly, personal responsibility. So this week, I want to try something different and give you a challenge, which is identify one area of your life where you've been wishing for effortlessness. Maybe it's your career, your relationships, creative projects, your health, whatever it is. And then ask yourself, what would change if I approached this with genuine investment instead of hoping it would be easy? What would it look like to put intentional effort into this area? Not doing so much that you burn out, but showing up with care and consistency. What would a healthy relationship with effort look like here? And this is the important part, is just to take one action this week that demonstrates how much you care. Because I know you are so much more capable than you're currently letting yourself reach for. And I don't mean this to sound like cheesy or overly preachy, but we sometimes are our own worst enemy. We judge ourselves a lot worse than any other people. So I just want you to know the only thing standing between you and you reaching your highest potential is your willingness to care and to try. Not because you have anything to prove to anyone else, but because you deserve to live a life that reflects the fullness of who you are. A life built on intentional effort in the areas that matters most. And not some false promise that everything worthwhile will come effortlessly. So that's it for today's episode. And now I'm sharing my current things, like things I'm currently experiencing for inspo. So currently I am reading Safety Net by Deanna Gray. Still is my fiction book, but I also started a new audiobook about nutrition. I think it's called Food Intelligence, which is co-authored by a scientist named Kevin Hall and a journalist named Julia Belaz. I am so sorry if I butchered that, because I want to start my picks for my quote-unquote year one early. And nutrition is one of the things I want to learn about more this year. Watching YouTube videos from my watch list, because I have a bad habit of saving videos to my watch list. That sounds interesting, but end up not watching it. So I've been trying to catch up while walking indoors. Drinking berry chocolate smoothies made with whatever berries we have. Like, I think right now it's strawberries. We have a couple blueberries left, but we're almost out of those. We now have raspberries, blackberries, and then adding plain Greek yogurt, 2 scoops of protein powder, obviously chocolate protein powder, 1 tablespoon of honey, 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, and sometimes I add a banana if we have it, and of course water, since I don't want to add milk if I'm using Greek yogurt, but I'm also really picky about like the consistency of the drink. Eating, I don't know what to say for this one because I am someone who changes what they eat often, but I've been loving eating chia seeds mixed with Greek yogurt and then topped with like air fried apples that I cook with honey, vanilla extract, cinnamon to kind of make this like makeshift apple pie moment. Loving journaling for goal tracking again. Hating trying to professionally connect with people. And I know I just kind of spent the episode talking about effort and everything. And I also know like this is something important, but I am constantly forcing myself to do this because there are times when I am in a social mood, but during the times I'm not, it just feels kind of frustrating to have to do. But I will, suck it up, put in the effort the way I need to because we're keeping it real over here. We're going to try our best and try to build a life of full potential. Currently I'm trying to finish my Notion. Specifically, this year I want to include insights from my transit chart, and I want to correctly calculate key points of like the waxing moon phase and the waning moon phase for alignment. And currently I am feeling inspired creatively, which is perfect because it allows me to have things in advance while I'm not being affected by my cycle. And now it's time for the card pull. If card pull readings are not your thing or not something you personally align with, but you like other aspects of my content, thank you for listening this far. And be sure to come back on Thursday and follow the podcast to stay up to date about new releases. So for today, of course, I'm using the Moonology deck, and 2 cards came out. The first one being the Balsamic Moon, A Time for Healing. And it says, pulling this card suggests that the past is in the past and a bright future is beckoning. However, before you take your next step, make sure that you and the situation feels healed. This is not the time to paper over cracks or to simply pretend that everything is okay. Rather, you still need a little more time to heal and to soothe both yourself and anyone else in need. Then remind yourself that anything is possible if you believe it. This is also a time to surrender and wait to hear guidance from the universe. Powerful insights can be had if you know that someone or something really isn't good for you. This card is a reminder to surrender. Start to work on your belief in your dreams so you're ready when the time comes. Attune to the moon. When one is healed, all are healed. Additional meanings for this card. It's time to let go of the past. You are about to turn the corner. You need more time to heal. Think about how this situation would look if everyone were healed. The teaching. Patience is required at the time of the Balsamic Moon. It's a time for self-care as you slowly but surely prepare yourself for the new moon, which is just around the corner. No matter which point of the current moon cycle you pull this card, it's a reminder to go a little bit easy on yourself. The time to step into your creative power will come soon enough. Give yourself the time you need. The second card we got is Full Moon Eclipse. Conclusions are within reach. Full Moon Eclipse, and just like that, the door slams. If you pulled this card, it suggests that the situation you're asking about to reach its peak or has done so, and things are now out of your hands. What you're experiencing now is what your soul signed up for, a way for you to learn and for your soul to evolve. So allow events to unfold and be easy on yourself. If you're letting go of someone or something, know that it's the right time, as hard as it may be. Forgiving someone for what they did could be key to resolving this situation in a positive way. It doesn't make what they did right, but it releases it so you can move on. Attune to the moon. That which is meant for me will not pass me by. Additional meanings for this card. Doors which slam now will not be reopened. It's time for you to get back on track. Forgiveness will set you free of karma. Meditation, pranayama, and yoga nidra are all recommended now. Seed control and let events unfold. The teaching. Full moons are nearly always about climaxes and very often about conclusions. A full moon eclipse can be hard to handle because it's potent change, something many of us are uncomfortable with. But change is a part of life, and this card, no matter when you pull it, reminds you of that fact. Full moon eclipses can also give us a glimpse into what Carl Jung called the shadow self. Work with your darkness. So these two cards together speak directly to the themes we explored today. The balsamic moon reminds us that before we can engage in healthy, intentional effort, we need to heal our relationship with it, to let go of the shame, the hustle culture wounds, and the fear of caring. This is about releasing the toxic narratives around effort that has kept us trapped in effortlessness illusions. The full moon eclipse then brings closure and boundary setting. It's the reminder that effort has limits, that we must recognize when something is out of our hands, and that honoring these natural endpoints protect us from burnout. And this is important to note. There is absolutely times when the right choice is low or no effort, such as toxic relationships that drain you. Walk away from them. Jobs that exploit you or demand more than they give. They deserve your exit, not your investment. And systems designed to extract from you, like it literally feels like it's sucking the life out of you. Protecting your energy isn't worth giving up, and that is obviously wisdom. The key here is discernment, knowing the difference when avoiding effort because you're afraid to care versus withdrawing effort because the situation doesn't deserve your investment. Also, an alternate meaning for these cards together, I think, is the balsamic moon might be calling for healing around like worthiness, specifically the belief that we don't deserve what we want or that our desires are shameful, while the full moon could be signaling that it's time to release relationships, opportunities, or patterns that no longer align with who we're becoming through our intentional efforts. Sometimes the most powerful form of effort is knowing when to stop investing in what isn't meant for us, allowing doors to close so better ones can open. And that is all for today. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of A Little Atypical. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear this. Remember to view the description box where you can find important links such as the one to my website where there is so much more bonus content, and also the link to my Substack where I am posting more on. So keep this in mind. Effort isn't the enemy. Caring isn't cringe. Trying isn't embarrassing. It's how you build a life that actually matters to you. So until next time, have a good day, evening, or night, and stay authentically atypical. Okay, bye.